This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome to Ancient Civilizations and Forgotten History, where we investigate the peoples, traditions, monuments, and beliefs that sit at the edges of conventional history. And that's the full package we have in this episode as we travel into the deserts and high plateaus of the American Southwest to a region where ancient settlements, ceremonial landscapes, and indigenous traditions have preserved some of North America's most unusual connections between earth and sky. Our focus is the work of researcher and author Gary A. David, whose studies of Hopi traditions and the archaeological landscape of Arizona have raised intriguing questions about the relationship between ancient settlements, celestial patterns, and sacred geography. Gary David has argued that the locations of certain Hopi villages and ancient sites may reflect patterns visible in the night sky. Let's bring Gary in. How did you get wrapped up in all this fascinating research, Gary?
Yeah, we have to go back quite a ways, maybe more than I'd like to admit, but maybe 25 years before I lived in Arizona, I lived in South Dakota. And I was working with the Lakota Sioux, and I met a woman named Charlotte Black Elk. And Charlotte was the great granddaughter of the famous Nicholas Black Elk, who wrote Black Elk Speaks, a Native American classic. And at the time, she was talking about this star map that she had on a buffalo hide. And she was relating it to various points in the Black Hills. The Black Hills are the kind of the center of the Lakota Sioux world or cosmology. And she said that the various stars, various constellations corresponded to certain spots in the Black Hills. And the Lakota used to make annual migrations around the Black Hills and performing a specific ceremony at each spot in the during the year, and at each very specific spots and specific times that these rituals were performed, and they all corresponded to celestial objects, Orion's belt, Sirius, the Pleiades. They all had correspondence in spots in the Black Hills. So this idea of as above, so below was very obvious in the Lakota cosmology. And this is the first time I had come across this idea that, that the Earth or the conception of a cosmology on the Earth would mirror the stars. So, it got me thinking about this, heaven's mirror, or the reflection of these spots on the Earth and in the heavens, on Earth as it is in heaven. And so when I got to Arizona, I've lived in Arizona for over 18 years, and I started going to some of these Kachina dances. The Kachinas are messenger spirits. They're intermediaries between the realm of the humans and the realm of the gods. And the Hopi still have these Kachina dances every year. They're kind of winding up for the season right now. They're having the last of the dances in July, and then they'll ease off, and the Kachinas will go back to their home, which is the San Francisco Peaks, and wait until after the winter solstice, and then the Kachinas will come back to the Hopi Mesas. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's the Kachinas have been with them for thousands of years. And if you've seen Kachina dolls, some of your listeners might be familiar with the Kachina dolls that the Hopi carve. Originally, these were carved not to sell to tourists, which they do today, but to instruct the children about all these various spirits that come to them, because there are so many different types of Kachinas. And, some of the it's a mask dance that they perform um, in the village plaza usually, and they dance for hours and hours in the hot sun. There's a lot of similarities between the Dogon and the Hopi, and it's quite amazing these mass dances that both of these tribes or groups, ethnic groups, perform. And they're obviously spirits that help the Hopi. These Kachinas are benevolent spirits, and they help with the agricultural cycle. They come right after the winter solstice and stay through the sowing season and into they stay through July, as I said, and then they go back to the San Francisco Peaks, which are the highest mountains in Arizona, and they stay there for the rest of the year until the cycle renews itself, and they go back to help the Hopi. It's a cyclic migration of these spirits that come and help them for a while on the mesas. Well, the mesas are about 60, 75 miles to the northeast of the San Francisco Peaks. And I started going, when I first came here into Arizona, I started going to these Kachina dances. And they're so powerful because, the Hopi live in these adobe villages, these stone and mud villages. And they've been in this region for well over 1,000 years. The oldest continuously inhabited community in the U.S. was established about 1100 AD. The Hopi made a number of migrations through the years, and before they came to this center place, which they're located now in Arizona, in northern Arizona, they made these tremendous migrations. And some believe that they went down into the Maya territory in the Yucatan, and there are tales of them going east to the Atlantic Ocean, and some of the myths involve the Snake Clan, which supposedly constructed Serpent Mound in southern Ohio. And they went up into Canada, into the far north, and they found Snake Clan petroglyphs in Alberta, Canada. So, so these people, before they established themselves on these three primary mesas in Arizona, they made this, centuries-long period of migrations and kind of circumambulating this, across the continent. And, and then they finally came to the center point, the axis mundi, or the center of the world, the center of the Hopi cosmology. And that's where they settled. And they're still there after, over 1,000 years. So my theory of the Arizona Orion correlation. And as I said, I was going up to one of these Kachina dances, and I was driving toward the Hopi Mesas, and I had just read Robert Bauval's book, The Orion Mystery, which, correlates the three major pyramids on the Giza Plateau to the belt stars of Orion. And, there are three primary mesas on that the Hopi live on, first, second, and third mesa. And I was just kind of idly gazing off into the distance as I approached them. I thought, well, maybe there's an Orion correlation right here in Arizona. And I put that in the back of my mind and went to see the dances and experience the dances. And then when I got home, I got out a map of Arizona and I got out a star chart, and I realized there was a direct correlation between the villages that the Hopi had constructed and every major star in the constellation Orion. And
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer, and back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
The reflection of the celestial onto the earth was almost perfect. There was a perfect match between the stars of Orion and the pattern of villages on the Arizona desert. And this just really, just floored me. It just blew me away, so to speak. And I started, going to these various sites and researching the sites. And, that was back in 1997. And, I've been going ever since with this theory. And each one of my books kind of builds on the other and presents different aspects of this basic correlation between the stars and the villages, the Hopi villages of. Oh, sure. In fact, right now I'm working on an ebook that kind of looks at all the Orion correlations that I could find on the globe, and one of these is Thornborough, which happens to be on the same meridian as Avebury and Silbury Hill and Stonehenge. If you look, it's the same longitude line that all these sites are located. And Lindisfarne is on that line as well. Yeah, there's one in Mexico, Teotihuacan, in north of Mexico City, which is a pretty direct correlation to Orion's belt. And, I found an Orion correlation in Nigeria, believe it or not. And, there's some in South Africa, some Orion correlations in South Africa. And, they're basically all over the planet. And, ancient cultures seem to have focused on this particular constellation, as well as Sirius and the Pleiades. Sirius was also an important star for the Hopi. The Hopi call Sirius Ponatsona, which means sucks from the belly, which indicates a mammal of some sort. It's not a dog as we think of the dog star, but it is a mammal that the Hopi are talking about, and relating this particular star to some sort of mammal, maybe an antelope, or perhaps it is a dog. They're direct line. And, in the course of my research, I extended this Orion correlation to adjacent constellations. And it seems that, the largest ruin site in the American Southwest is called Chaco Canyon. And there are, a number of ruins, about a dozen different ruins in this canyon, and they're huge complexes. And this site corresponds to the star Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens, corresponds to the largest set of ruins in the Southwest. Sure, there's rock art, well, basically all over the Southwest, but there's rock art been found in Chaco Canyon that corresponds. One of the famous ones is a rock painting or pictograph that depicts the 1054 supernova explosion.
Yeah.
Happened in 1054 AD. And, the Chinese recorded the same supernova explosion, and it's found in Chaco Canyon. So, the ancient Hopi, and they call themselves the Hizatsinom, which simply means ancient people. Scientists used to call them Anasazi, like back in the 1970s. The Anasazi was a kind of a romantic term, but actually the Anasazi means ancient enemy, and it's a Navajo word. The Navajo also live in the American Southwest, And currently, the Navajo reservation surrounds the Hopi reservation, and it's much larger. And the Navajo are more recent in coming to this region. But the Hopi didn't like being called, their ancestors being called ancient enemies. So they kind of insisted on the term Hizatsinom, or old ones. Well, it's a kind of a nice sounding word, and it sounds rather romantic, and this was a term that was, as I said, used by a lot of archaeologists back in the 70s, but it fell out of favor. Now the archaeologists name them something like the Ancestral Puebloans, which is not quite, it has the pizzazz of the Anasazi. The Hopi are basically farmers. They grow corn, beans, and squash, and that's the traditional dietary triad. And the corn came up from Mexico thousands of years ago. The knowledge of corn growth, and the Hopi live in these stone apartment buildings, you might call them. They're called pueblos, and there are a number of villages. There are about a dozen villages spread out across these three primary mesas. And each village has a specific elder or group of elders that pass on the various traditions. And, the Hopi are not exactly monolithic as a tribe. There are variances in the different myths that each village has. So that's why it's hard to talk about the Hopi as a group, because, each village has a slightly different tradition that they abide by, and but there are also a couple different types of dialects on the Hopi reservation. So it's not the unified group of people that people like to talk about the Hopi, the quote unquote Hopi. There are a number of villages that comprise the Hopi as a people. Sure, well, it's the easy way to think about it, but the Hopi are very complex people. I've never run into quite the complexity of ritual and cosmology as a Hopi. Like I said, I studied the Lakota, Sioux, and South Dakota, and they have an amazing cosmology in their own right. But the Hopi, the complexities of different clans and different groups of clans, and how they interrelate, and the cycle of the rituals throughout the year, it's just it's almost overwhelming how complex it really is. And I'm sure that I don't have a very good grasp of it. I'm just scratching the surface as a non-Hopi. Yeah, it's unless you're in that culture and grew up with it, it's very hard to. Oh yeah, I have a master's degree in English literature and literature of the American West, and and as I said, I taught on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and familiar with Native Americans in general throughout my adult life. So the Hopi, I've been around for almost over 18 years here in Arizona, and studied them and interacted with them and watched some of the rituals. It's an amazing work, and you really have to, it's a really diligent kind of study of how ancient mythology really encodes celestial knowledge, and the idea of the precession of the equinoxes, and how the different worlds come and go. And that's one of the major things about the Hopi. They have this idea of cyclic time, much like the Maya, and that they have basically four different worlds have come. We're in the fourth world right now, according to the Hopi, at the very end of the fourth world, in fact. And we could get into some of the prophecy and aspect. That's another really interesting facet of the Hopi people, because say that the Hopi are kind of like they have a legacy of prophecy. I mean, it goes way back, and they have prophets that have predicted certain events in the future, and this is part of the culture. And since the middle of the Blue Star will appear in the sky at the end of the fourth world, which is kind of a warning that the age is coming to a close. And a lot of people have different ideas of what the Blue Star may be, or it might have been the Hale-Bopp comet back in 1997. Well, you look at the pictures of the Hale-Bopp, and I was out looking at it myself here in Arizona. And it's definitely blue. You could see it in the sky in the...
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Oh, yeah, in the evening, and it had a long tail, long blue tail. And then, in fact, a lot of people were out looking at the Hale-Bopp comet when the Phoenix lights appeared. And that's a whole other realm of Hopi thinking. The Hopi believe that at the end of the fourth world. Well, in fact, the Phoenix lights, I was very unfortunate in the fact that I went inside just before the Phoenix lights flew over my town. Yeah. It was first sighted in around a little south of Las Vegas, in Henderson, Nevada. And then a next reported sighting was like 5 miles north of me. And then another sighting was my town, Chino Valley, Arizona. And it worked its way south towards Phoenix. And that's, where a lot of the people, thousands of people saw this triangular craft. And it was supposedly like a mile across. And some of my neighbors saw it, and they thought, this is amazing. It's just a huge thing that kind of drifted across the sky. And unfortunately, I'd just gone inside and missed the whole show. But this is another facet of Hopi culture, along with prophecy. They have the idea that the Kachinas come in these flying craft. They call them pa tuvota, or flying shields. And traditionally, this was, part of the culture that the Kachina would come in these craft and interact with the people. And sometimes the Kachinas even took Hopi brides. So, this it kind of mirrors the abduction phenomenon, the modern abduction phenomenon quite well. I think especially since the mid-20th century, some of these prophecies that the elders had predicted were starting to come true in during World War II, the ending of World War II, the dropping of the atom bomb. The Hopi had predicted that years before, and they called it a gourd of ashes would fall on the earth very soon. And when this happened, a group of elders, especially in a village called Hotbilla on the Third Mesa, began to release some of these Hopi prophecies. Before that time, the prophecies were secret and really not known to the world. And after World War II, and they confirmed that one of their main prophecies had come true, that they thought that they should release some of the other prophecies And there are a number of different prophecies according to the different elders. But it was starting to come to pass, these things, and they thought that the end of the fourth world was coming to a close. And one of the signs, of course, as we mentioned, was the Blue Star, the warning sign. A lot of people think the comet Ison coming up at the end of this year might be that Blue Star. As you said, I like the idea of Hale Bopp being.
Me too.
But we'll see. We'll have to see what this comet Ison, the comet of the century, supposedly, if it pans out to be.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they say, that this will be. You'll be able to see it during the day. Yeah, I think so. The Hopi, kind of have a philosophical view of things. They've gone through the destruction of three different worlds. The first world by fire, the second world by ice, and the third world was a great flood. So the flood myth is universal. A lot of Native Americans have flood myths, where you wouldn't think. The Hopi are an inland tribe of farmers, and they have this idea of a great flood. And so one version of the myth is that they came across the Pacific Ocean on reed rafts, and they came to the west coast of North America, and they came up through the Gulf of California, and they paddled up the Colorado River, and they emerged around the area of Grand Canyon. And this is one of the myths, a trans-Pacific migration from, somewhere in the South Pacific, escaping a great flood. And yeah, I talk about this in my most recent book. There are some clues from James Churchward. He talks about the continent of Mu, and he discusses the Anasazi in particular. He calls them the cliff dwellers. They were the last wave to leave this sinking continent of Mu, and they came to the American Southwest. And Churchward also came to New Mexico and Arizona, and he compared some of the symbols of Mu that he had found, and with the rock art in the American Southwest. And he said that the symbols were virtually identical. Okay. Yeah. So that's one of the confirmations of this Hopi myth. And you wouldn't expect, farmers, desert farmers, to have this myth of, sailing across the Pacific, but indeed they do. A lot of people are fascinated with this story. It's been called the Lost City of the Dead in Grand Canyon. It's also been called Kincaid's Cave. There was a man named G.E. Kincaid, and he was originally from Idaho, and he was working for the Smithsonian Institute. And this was in 1909, 1908 and 1909. And there was an article that appeared in the April 5th, 1909 edition of the Arizona Gazette, which was Phoenix daily newspaper at the time. And this was a front page article that talked about this man, Kincaid, going down from Green River, Wyoming, and starting off in October of 1908 and sailing down the Colorado River in a boat. He was, as I said, working for the Smithsonian, but he was also, of course, looking for gold along the way, and prospecting. But he came to an area in Grand Canyon, which, it's called Marble Canyon, really, in the place where he found this cave.
Mm-hmm.
It's just north of the place where the Little Colorado River flows into the main Colorado River. And he saw this cave on the side of the cliff, and it was very high up. It was about 2,000 feet above the river, and it was about 1,500 feet below the rim of the canyon. So it was way up there on the side of the cliff. And he said that he got to the entrance of this cave, and he made it with great difficulty, which I think is probably an understatement. It's just an amazing climb that he would have to have taken to get to this cave. But this article talks about the cave opening was a kind of a rectangular carved opening, and it was about 12 feet wide, and a tunnel went into the side of the cliff horizontally, and this tunnel went back hundreds and hundreds of feet, and there were side passageways, and amazingly enough, he found that there were oval-shaped doors in this cave, obviously carved, and there were ventilation shafts. There was a whole ventilation system in this complex. And there was a couple different huge rooms, and there were passageways going off from one of these huge chambers, like he said, like spokes on a wheel. So this, just amazing, huge complex in this tunnel that he discovered. You're not allowed to hike that area of the Grand Canyon. It's off limits. So for some reason, the national park system doesn't want you to go there. And there are a lot of theories about what happened to the artifacts that were supposedly found. These artifacts were just amazing. Some of these artifacts were like gold cups and urns and vases and copper weapons. And there was like a smelting operation because they found slag there. He found, and then pottery. They found pottery and stone tablets with some sort of hieroglyphic writing on these tablets, and granaries, and like a huge dining hall was found there. And also, one of the most interesting artifacts was apparently a marble statue, a carved marble statue of Buddha sitting in a lotus posture, holding a lotus in each hand. Like a life-size Buddha statue.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer, and back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
In another room, they found it's called the crypt. They found a number of male mummies lying on these carved rock shelves. And, there were like broken swords by their side. Maybe they were warriors or something like that. But the article stated that there were like several hundred rooms in this whole complex. And I find it's hard to believe, but they said, this complex could hold up to 50,000 people. So it was a major, if true, it was partially natural, but obviously there's some of the, the tunnels were carved by humans. And the extent of these artifacts, some say that the artifacts were Egyptian or Tibetan, so these are definitely ooparts or out of place artifacts that shouldn't have been there. The Hopi have this tradition of going down into caves during the destruction of the first world by fire, some kind of asteroid strike or comet, and the second world by ice. a pole shift that causes an ice age or something. And the Hopi have these traditions of going down into these caverns. The Sipapu or Sipapuni is very close to this region where the cave is supposedly located. I went with a group in May of 2012, and we went up on the rim of Grand Canyon, right above where this cave is supposedly located. Okay, and unfortunately, the cave, it's a straight drop down to where the cave is. So you'd have to rappel down, using a winch and rope, and you'd have to rappel down the side of this vertical cliff. Well, this article pinpoints the location fairly specifically because it says that the cave is 42 miles upstream from the mouth of Crystal Creek, which is, if you've ever been to Grand Canyon, it's around the vicinity of the main village in Grand Canyon, a little bit northwest of there. But he said Kincaid said it's 42 miles from this spot, the mouth of Crystal Creek. And I mapped this out on Google Earth and went 42 miles. And, I have it pretty much pinpointed within a mile of where this cave might be. It's such rugged terrain, and there are so many different little inlets in the, helicopters go down there all the time. Tourist helicopters. It's just like a labyrinth of different caves and different, geological formations. It's just, it would be very hard to find, and it's in such formidable terrain that you'd have to be an expert rock climber to rappel down the side. Like I said, we went, a group of us, including David Childress and Chris O'Brien and some others. We went, to the spot right above it. And we also found a kind of a megalithic site right above it, within a mile or so of this. And I have pictures of this in my book. This stone circle with a number of huge blocks that are piled one on top of the other, and it's really out in the middle of nowhere. We were there for about 4 days, and we only saw 3 other people. There, a grandfather and grandmother and their granddaughter herding sheep. Navajo. So, it's on Navajo land that we were at. And, we found this huge megalithic stone circle, which I couldn't explain it. There's some theories that it might be like a sheepfold to keep sheep in, but that certainly wouldn't keep the coyotes from jumping over these stone blocks and getting the sheep. It's kind of crude compared to some of the megaliths over there, but these obviously were multi-ton blocks that they, for some reason, the spiral is pretty unique. I found a similar site closer to where I'm at, kind of a sun dagger, and there are a lot of these sun dagger kind of things where a little sliver of light comes into the center of the spiral on the summer solstice. In my first book, I have pictures of one that I found and a star map that corresponds to the various constellations in the Hopi cosmology. But it's very similar. There are a lot of spiral all over the Southwest, as I say, and back in the eastern part of the U.S. There are these spirals, and really they're all over the world. I have a chapter in one of my books about the spiral and the universality of it, but it has to do with like at Newgrange, the solstice alignments. Exactly. Yeah. And this might be the result of a world culture in very ancient times that shared this knowledge with each other, a world civilization that sort of got wiped out by the Ice Age, but these traditions still persist in various forms in different continents. They're still using a technology that was created over 1,000 years ago. And the group that created them are called the Hohokam. And they lived contemporaneous with the Hopi. The Hopi lived in northern Arizona, and the Hohokam lived in the Phoenix Basin in central Arizona, in what's called the low desert. The Hopi are in the high desert, but these Hohokam built these huge canals, a system of canals, something like 500 miles of these canals. And the major canals were huge. A lot of work went into building them and digging these canals, which, they found canals like 75 feet across and 12 feet deep. Some of these major ones. And to imagine moving that amount of earth and stone, with baskets on their back. So they moved all this stone and dirt on their backs in these woven baskets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an amazing feat. It's been compared with these canals have been compared with the building of the Great Pyramids. They're so monumental, and very few people know about them. And also these Hohokam people also build flat top pyramids or they call them platform mounds, and they built villages, these adobe villages on top of these mounds. And you can, if you ever go to Phoenix, I strongly suggested going to a place called Pueblo Grande. It's right adjacent to the Phoenix airport. It's within, you can see the planes coming in fact. And, it's an ancient Hohokam site on top of this huge platform mound that's larger than, a football field. And it's like, 15 feet high and larger than a football field. And they, on top of this, they built this huge village. It's just an amazing, it boggles the mind that these people, went to all this work to build this canal system in order to grow corn, corn, beans, and squash. And I also discovered that there were different solstice alignments to the different, the way that various villages were aligned. For instance, there's one village, it's called Orion. It's on Third Mesa, and it's the oldest continuously inhabited village in the North American continent. But if you look to the southwest, there's a village called Wupatki, about 60 miles away to the southwest. And this forms a winter solstice sunset line between these two villages of Orion and Wupatki. And it also aligns with the San Francisco Peaks, which is the highest point in Arizona. And as I mentioned before, the home of the Kachinas. So, there's also this solar aspect of, or solar alignments between these various villages. And so, the Hopi were not only star watchers, but they were sun watchers. And they used the place where the sun rose on the horizon as a sort of calendar. And of course, the sun rises at a different spot on the horizon through the course of the year. And this is the way that they would, gauge their agricultural calendar. So, these solstice alignments were very important to their survival as a people, practically.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Well, this template, it was huge that I stumbled on. It encompasses Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, and it goes over into Grand Canyon. The left arm of Orion reaches over to the Grand Canyon and some of the stars that rest inside the Grand Canyon, which is the place of emergence of the Hopi. It's just a vast template that the Hopi somehow, formulated. And there are different theories about how they did this. Like I said before, they had this. There's a theory that a fairly maverick archaeologist has come up with. And Chaco Canyon is on a longitude line that includes a number of different sites in the Southwest and going down into Mexico. And they're exactly on this longitude line. He calls it the Chaco Meridian. The archaeologist named Stephen Lexon came up with this idea of the Chaco Meridian. They built, the ancient people built the Chaco Canyon, and then they built a couple sites north on the same meridian, and then a site called Casas Grandes in Mexico is on the same meridian. So I think they were cognizant of the idea of a meridian, and a longitude line that they, and latitude also. Some of the Pacific sailors had what they called star pillars, stars that are directly overhead. And if they sailed east or west and kept this star basically overhead, various stars, according to the latitude, if they kept this one star overhead, they could assume that they were at about the same latitude. So, both latitude and longitude was important. I really think that the original longitude line was the Giza prime meridian. Because, Giza is at 31 degrees longitude east. And I think this was actually the 0 degrees it was the prime meridian at the time, because a lot of different sites in Africa line up with this meridian. Nabta Playa, south of Giza, this astronomical observatory, one of the oldest in the world, is on this meridian. The Great Zimbabwe stone, it's the largest stone structure south of the pyramids, the Egyptian pyramids, and this is right on this longitude line, the same longitude line. Some believe that the Shona people, the Shona tribe, the black Africans, totally built it in the medieval times, like 1300, 1100, something like that. But other people believe that, it was built by Phoenicians. In fact, a Sangoma or shaman named Credo Mutwa from South Africa, he's a Zulu shaman. He claims that the Phoenicians built this complex of Great Zimbabwe. This is a black African, Credo Mutwa, saying that the Phoenicians built it thousands of years ago. No, that's the dogma that mainstream archaeologists like to persist in perpetrating or perpetuating, that the Native Americans kind of walked their way across the land bridge from Siberia, and that would have been the hard way to do it, because you're fighting glaciers, and you'd have to cross rivers that flowed into the ocean all the time, and that's simply the hardest way to do it. And maybe some some might have done this, but we found sites in South America, Monteverde and so forth, that are 16,000 years old, and people were down in South America.
Yeah.
And this is the time that supposedly they were just crossing over the land bridge. But I think in academia, the mainstream academia still tries to hold on to this idea that the bulk of Native Americans crossed over on this bridge, this land bridge, before the ice melted. But it's there's a lot of evidence to suggest that navigation took place in very early times across the Pacific and also across the Atlantic. To the east coast of North America. Some people say that it was Atlantis. I had a friend that claimed that this was indeed Atlantis, but the Aztlan is it's a term that basically means place of the heron. The heron was the symbol of Aztlan. Okay.
Mhm.
And it was just a basic culture that lived in northern Mexico during the age when the Spanish were coming onto the continent and interacting with the Native Americans. And there's a special culture called the Aztlanians that lived in Sinaloa, Mexico, and that region. And they've done some research, and a lot of pottery has been. And I show some examples of the pottery in the book. And this is also along that meridian line that connects Aztlan with Casas Grandes, with a place called Mimbres settlements in southern New Mexico, and also Chaco Canyon. All along this meridian line, there seems to be these cultures strung out along this particular longitude line. The Ant people helped the Hopi. This is some of the myths of the survival of the Hopi people after two different cataclysms. As I mentioned before, we've lived in 4 different worlds. The first world was destroyed by fire, a kind of maybe a cometary impact or asteroid impact. It connected with fire, destruction of the earth by fire. And the Ant people took the Hopi down into these caverns and taught them how to sprout beans. That's one of the main food sources for the Hopi is the bean. And the Ant people supposedly helped the Hopi and taught the Hopi how to sprout these beans inside the caves, inside the caverns. And today, the Hopi have a bean dance or bean ceremony in February that commemorates this time when the Ant people helped the Hopi survive in these subterranean caverns. The second world was destroyed by ice. Okay, an ice age, a pole shift, something like that. And again, the Ant people took the Hopi down into these caverns to help them get past this destruction of the world. So the Ant people helped the Hopi survive 2 different times. Apparently, the Hopi were on their own for the destruction of the third world, which was by flood. The Ant people didn't play a part in that, but the Ant people did, help the Hopi survive. The Maya had a writing system, but the Hopi have the oral tradition. And as you say, there are a lot of different checks about how to tell the story properly and how to transmit the myth. And the Hopi in times past used to spend a lot of the winter months down in kivas talking about these myths and talking to the young people about these myths and the right way to transmit. And there'd be arguments about the right way to transmit the story. Maybe something was left out or something put in that was not supposed to be put in. So as you say, there's a lot of checks. It's not just you can say anything and anything will fly. It's a tradition that is very rigorous,
Mm.
And the people, because they knew that they were transmitting this sacred knowledge. It wasn't just merely fairy tales they were talking about. They
Sure.
were talking about the history of the people, and they wanted to get it right for the younger generation. And, mythology is the main part of the Hopi and the Dogon,
Yeah.
and both cultures also have symbols. It's not a written language per se, but there are a number of symbols. I've recently tried to get into the pale fox, about the Dogon culture, and just the symbology there is just amazing.
Complex.
Very complex, and it's a form of writing. Really, all these symbols, is a form of writing. It's an ideogram or ideographic kind of transmission of knowledge. Well, like I say, I was introduced through the Lakota to this concept, and it seemed to hold true for the Hopi as well, having these star contacts, these star ancestors. And, it's the same for, I have a Zuni friend that says the same thing. Zuni is another Pueblo tribe in the New Mexico.
Mhm.
And he says, all the Kachinas are basically star ancestors
Mm.
that, they come from the skies, and we receive our knowledge from these celestial beings. And that's kind of a given in that culture. And, a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at, ancient aliens. I'm not sure that it's as physical as some, it's not necessarily nuts and bolts craft, traversing the galaxy and coming to Earth. It might be interdimensional, and it might be, time travelers, something along those lines that the Hopi and the Dogon are reporting. I think there's an awakening, and that the idea of the old paradigm is falling away. And like I say, for instance, the land bridge theory is really starting to crumble. The bridge is falling apart, and I don't think scientists can really claim that too much longer. And these new paradigms of global navigation in early times. I think probably the next area of research will be genetics to prove that different people traveled around the globe, and you can prove this genetically. Certain DNA traces found all over the globe will kind of nail this idea of diffusionism as opposed to isolationism, which it has been the main theory up till now. The isolationists,
Sure.
that the Native Americans were just these scattered bands kind of surviving on their own in North America after they made it across from Siberia. But this is obviously not the case.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
NFL football season is here, which means when you switch to Verizon, it feels like touchdown, because you get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube on us when you buy an eligible 5G phone on select unlimited plans, which means you can watch every out-of-market game every Sunday afternoon, and it's all on us. Now that's the Verizon way to kick off the NFL football season right. Switch and get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube on us, only with Verizon.